Hello anglers, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kel Kellogg, and if you're not already a subscriber, please take a second to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, and you'll always know when I'm here on YouTube talking about fishing. And that's what I'm about to do right now. It is time for our weekly salmon fishing report here in Northern California. I also have a super secret fishing tactic that I'm going to share with you guys at the end of this video. But let's lead off before I get into the salmon fishing. Let me give you a quick tip. I just got back from the doctor. Look at my arm. First time ever in my life I got poison oak, and it is no joke. I had to get a shot. I had to get pills. So if you're going to be out hiking around Northern California this summer, learn what poison oak looks like and learn to avoid it. And if you do get into it, I didn't know this, I know this now, my doctor told me today, keep some Dawn dishwashing soap or similar soap in your car and wash down with a washcloth and some water if you think you got the poison oak on you. It works by putting an oil on your skin, and if you get it off quick enough, your arm won't look like that. That's a good thing. Take my word for it. Anyway, salmon fishing. Salmon fishing hasn't changed that much from the last report, okay? Most of the action is at the top end of the system and at the bottom end of the system. Let's start off at the bottom end of the system out in the Pacific Ocean. You know, it's not slam dunk limits every day, but some days it is still limits, and days when it's not limits, it's near limits. Fish are still running big. 25, 30-pound fish, fairly common right now. They're right outside the Golden Gate. If you're going to get out there and get after them, if you're going to go on a charter boat, they'll tell you what to use. If you're going to go on a private boat, all you need to do is troll rigged anchovies. Find the fleet, troll rigged anchovies, and you're going to be yelling fish on, and they're going to be big, beautiful, great eating fish. And I'll bet you on an incoming tide, if you're a guy that doesn't like to take his boat outside the bay, I bet you can go over there in California City, grind on an incoming tide, and have a pretty good opportunity of hooking a fish. Because usually this time of the year, you know, the fish are starting to filter up the system, and that's kind of the last place you can get them to go on a rigged anchovy, to go, you know, on a feeding type bite. Always worth trying late in the season, and it's worth trying right on through October, because those fish, they come into Golden Gate, they make that left turn, and they're swimming right through that area. So incoming tide, get out there, troll with the same gear you'd use out on the ocean, and you got a shot. You got a shot at going big. So ocean fishing, outstanding. Moving up the system, there still hasn't been a salmon caught in Benicia, and there's some old timers. Those guys are out there every day, and they have yet to report a fish being hooked or a fish being landed. Quite a few people are out there fishing. You know, somebody's got to be the first person to catch one out there, but from what I'm hearing, they're saying the water is a little bit too warm right now for good action right there off the jetty, or the riprap rather, there off of First Street, the state park, places, you know, like that, where guys like to get out there and cast and throw spinners. As I said last week, you know, great camaraderie out there, a little smack talking. So if you live in the area and you want to get out there, you want to visit with some other anglers, and maybe, you know, you're going to be the first guy, get out there, throw those Mepps Flying C's or other spinners. Work hard. It's the fish of 1,000 casts, but it's one of the few places you can catch an ocean fresh king, or practically ocean fresh, without being on a boat. Enough said. Let's move up the system, and let's talk about the Delta a little bit. Not much salmon action in the Delta. It's gonna come. It is gonna come, and you do stand a chance of hooking one out there. There have been a few fish caught. Fish are going through there because fish are, you know, ending up there in the Red Bluff Redding area, so there are fish swimming through there. They're probably swimming through at night. That's probably what's happening. The water in the Delta is warm. Right now, there is some pretty darn good striper action going on out there in the West Delta, in the Central Delta. The thing is with fishing, you know, this time of the year, August and September stripers, they tend to stay on the move. So they won't necessarily be at a spot today where you found them yesterday, or where your buddy found them yesterday. They tend to move around. Water temperature's high, you know, they don't feel compelled to hold in any given area. They're just moving, they're looking for food, but if you get into them, the action's really good. So if you want to get out there in the West Delta and do some trolling, makes a lot of sense. Middle parts of the tides, go out there and pull those spinners, pull those flatfish, try to get into a salmon, especially on the incoming current. But at the ends of the tides, you'd be wise to switch over to striper gear and try to get your striper on. Because right now, the striper fishing is much better than the salmon fishing in the Delta, and you have a much better chance of hooking a fish when you're targeting the stripers. But just like the guys in Benicia, somebody's got to be the guy to hook one, and you're not going to hook one, a big king, I mean, if you don't have your line in the water. So we should have really good action in the Delta in September into October. It's coming. Be patient, be ready, and you're going to get your fish on. And before I get up to the top end of the system up there, if you are looking for a great trolling style rod, my striper halibut salmon rods are absolutely perfect for our fisheries. It took me 3 years to develop this rod, trigger stick, foam grip. It is the perfect rod for trolling for stripers in the Delta, bait fishing stripers in the Delta, trolling for salmon in the Delta and throughout the system, and also for live bait halibut fishing if you get down there in San Francisco Bay and you're making some drifts for halibut. You want one of these rods, get on over to fishhuntshoot.com and we will hook you up with the one and only trigger stick rod designed specifically for our fisheries here in Northern California. I've done that kind of fishing for years, guys, and I put a lot of thought and a lot of design into this rod. So get yourself one and you'll be yelling fish on. The best river salmon fishing in the state, it's no secret, it's taking place up there above Red Bluff. Now, that is a technical part of the river to navigate. You're not just going to go up there with your, your regular old prop boat and go out there and drive around and catch a salmon. You could, but you also could break your prop or get stuck on the land or, whatever. So unless you really know your stuff, you want to go out with a guide up there, and there's plenty of good guides. A lot of them are booked up now, but there's always cancellations. Maybe a guy gets poison oak or something and he doesn't show up for his trip. So it doesn't hurt to call Kevin Brock, Mike Bogue, Kirk Portocarrero, just to name three. Jeff Goodwin, he works with some very talented salmon guides up in that area. Fishing is very good, 25 to 30 pound fish, pretty darn common. A lot of guys are pulling plugs. At least they're pulling plugs early and then they're switching over to roe. Some guys are coming out of the box with roe, but most guys are starting out early with plugs. Then when the sun hits the water, they tend to spread out a little bit, get away from the crowd and start working with that roe. Other guys, probably Kirk Portocarrero, because he is a plug trolling maniac. He's probably fishing those big old flatfish all day long. So, your guide, he's got his fishing, dialed into his approach, his style. Just make sure you're going with a guy that has some experience up there. Check him out, do a little background work. But those guys that I just mentioned, they've got years of experience and they will put you on the best possible action day in, day out, every day of the year. It's just excellent fishing right now. The downside of that fishery is the fish have swam, well over 100 miles to get up there. Some of the fish are dark at times typically, or at least, this time of the year, I wouldn't say they're dark, but they certainly aren't chrome bright. But they are good fish for the smoker, and they fight like absolute tigers. They fight like crazy. So if you want to get your river salmon on right now, you probably want to go to that area up above Red Bluff if you're looking for a, shooting fish in a barrel kind of situation. I've done a couple tutorials on how to work plugs up there and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a little tutorial before you go out with a guide, if you want to make sure you got all your ducks in a row, look back on the channel and find some of my other salmon fishing reports and some of my river salmon fishing videos, because I break it all down for you. It's not super easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. There's some things you got to do. There's some instructions you need to follow to make the most of it. I was taught by some of the best guys out there, and I pass all that knowledge along to you guys on the channel. And this is a good time to segue into my tip this week. And this tip is they won't get mad at me, but this tip is kind of undermining some of the best guides in the state out in the Delta. They might not like me sharing this tip with you, but I'm going to share it anyway. So here, let me pull a little slack here. Let me show you my leader. And we're talking striper fishing now. We were talking striper trolling. I got my striper halibut salmon rod here. This could be your favorite rod, whatever. I hope you're using one of mine, but if you're not, that's cool. You want to spool up with braided line. In this case, I think this is 40-pound braid on here. You want to be spooled up from, with 30 to 65-pound braids, somewhere in that range. I prefer to be a little heavier than 30 because I tend to get excited and I can break 30-pound braid pretty easy on the hook set, so don't do that. So anyway, I have a level wind reel. I happen to have a line counter here, which is really nice to have when you're out trolling in the Delta. It's good to know how far your gear is behind the boat when you're trolling for stripers or when you're trolling for salmon. If you want to kind of replicate the same presentation time after time, it's just nice to have a line counter. It's also nice when you're fighting a big fish like a salmon that you could tell your partner, okay, get ready, Bill. He's 17 feet away, you know, stuff like that. So I like line counters. Spool it up with braid. Now, what you want to do, you want to bring that braid down, your main line down, to either a swivel or a snap swivel. Doesn't matter much. You can put a bead on it as well. I had a bead on here, but I ended up losing it when I retied that knot, so it's gone. But you can certainly put a bead there, and it will help pick up any weeds that are on your line that are trying to work their way down to your lure, okay? Leader, 25-pound copolymer. In this case, it's 25-pound CXX line. You don't need fluorocarbon. The copolymer, it gives you some extra stretch, and to me, either that Trilene big game line or the P-line CXX, both of those brands are just exceptionally tough, and they will not let you down. I remember one time I was out with the late Barry Canavero. I was out with Barry, Justin Wolf, and Bob Sims. So that was a fun trip. We started out trolling. We ended up down at off the power plant there in Pittsburgh, and we were fishing with bullheads. Anyway, long story short, Barry had me fishing with a rod that was spooled up with 15-pound P-line CXX. I hooked the fish on a bullhead. The fish ran up and went around Barry's anchor chain, and he used an all chain anchor out there, and that fish was wrapped around it. I ended up passing the rod up to Barry. Barry worked it around the chain, gave me the rod back. I landed that fish. I can't remember how big it was. It was big, 15, 16, 17 pounds, something like that. And I firmly believe if I hadn't been using P-line CXX, I would have never landed that fish because it was running back and forth on that big galvanized chain. And I don't know how the line didn't part, but it didn't part. And I have other stories like that about Trilene big game line and about P-line CXX. So if you're looking for tough line and fluorocarbon is not a factor, that stuff's hard to beat, man. It is tough as tough can be. So here's the secret lure, okay? If you're going out to the Delta and you're going to troll for stripers, you know, conventional wisdom, you're either going to use a deep dive in Yozuri or a shallow run in Yozuri, and you're going to put a white or a pink or a chartreuse worm on the back hook, and that's a great presentation. You could substitute a bomber. You can substitute a P-line predator on the deep running side. You can substitute a P-line angry eye on the shallow running side. Basically, same dealio. You're running a minnow plug with a worm on the hook, and you're trolling it anywhere from about 3 to 5 miles an hour, depending if you're running a shallow runner or a deep runner. That's great. Here's a lure most guys don't pull, and they should pull. And I learned this from Dave Hammond of Delta Pro Fishing. This is, brand doesn't matter. It's just a rattling, vibrating crankbait. This is a Berkeley Frenzy, I think it's called. I don't even know if they make these anymore. But it could be a rattle trap. It could be a Cordell spot. It could be any vibrating crankbait. Half ounces work. 3/4 ounces are better. 1 ounces are even better than that, okay? And you are going to troll this. You're going to troll this about 3 to 4 miles an hour, and you are going to troll it when you find fish in shallow water. Shallow water, 6 feet or less. Spool this bad boy back 100 feet. Troll it through the zone. It has a lot of noise. There's a lot of rattles in there. Intense vibration, intense flash, and guess what? It has a threadfin shad silhouette, which is what the stripers are looking to feed out there on in the first place. So they're going to be able to find it, and when they get visual, when they get their eyes on it, they're going to see nothing but a shad. And what do you think is going to happen next? Show a striper a threadfin shad, he's going to eat it. So that works very well. If you get the fish up on a sandbar or something like that on a shoal where it's, 7, 6, 5, 4 feet deep, run one of these through the zone. On what colors work? Chrome and blue is great. Chrome and black is great. All white is great. Bluegill is good. Crawfish is good. And, those are about the colors. You could run the Fire Tiger or whatever. I like to go with the natural colored stuff. Blue and silver or blue and white, something like that. Dark over light. Imitate a shad. The